Why do we seem to love when our favorite characters go through trauma? Is it simple schadenfreude, or is there something more to it? Many of the world's most enduring stories and tales are tragedies. Romeo and Juliet, whose tropes still appear in all kinds of media today, or for a more modern example, Fullmetal Alchemist, whose tale of the Orc brothers begins and is ultimately defined by the tragedy of their mother. The Muses will forever sing of the wrath of Achilles, wrought by the death of his lover Patroclus. My question today: why don't we ever ask them to change the tune? If I am left with a rose in my hand, let it die. Admittedly, the concept of schadenfreude in relation to this video is rather irrelevant. If you don't know, schadenfreude is a term that means to take joy in the suffering of others. It's a rather common emotion, something that you and I have both experienced in some capacity. Have you ever heard of a classmate you don't particularly like failing a test and gotten a little giggle out of it? That's schadenfreude, and I bring it up mainly to get out of the way the fact that there will forever be people who just enjoy seeing others suffer, real or fictional. Now, when I say the names Electra and Guts, is the first thing that comes to mind, these two have absolutely nothing in common. One's a Greek mythological princess, and the other a lowly mercenary from a Japanese manga, but they have more connecting them than you might think. Like Guts, Electra was betrayed by the person closest to her, her mother Clytemnestra, and like Electra, Guts became consumed by revenge towards Griffith because of this betrayal. How about Cordelia of Shakespeare and Karai of the TMNT? Both are banished by their fathers, or father figure in Karai's case, despite their unwavering loyalty, and both are ultimately returned to favor. Cordelia by Lear, and Karai by Splinter, who accepts her as his daughter, much like Lear does to Cordelia at the end. Or for another example, what of Light Yagami from Death Note and Macbeth, the titular character from Shakespeare's Macbeth? Both start out as noble and relatively normal people, and both are decidedly ruined by having power given to them due to their own increasing paranoia. The amazing YouTube creator Lindsay Ellis, in her video The Last of the Game of Thrones Hot Takes, explores the idea that power doesn't corrupt, power reveals. That is a discussion for another day. However, I recommend that you check out that video and her channel in particular, though she doesn't need a shout out from me. She is a huge inspiration for me, and I hope to one day be able to articulate my thoughts as intelligently as she does. Now that I'm done kissing ass, however, let's return to the topic at hand. I had originally gathered up a list of many more characters, classical and modern, to compare the similar tragic tropes and plotlines found between them. Now, there is the argument to be made that many of these character beats and plot points are as old as storytelling itself. This is true, but the art of telling stories is something of an Ouroboros. Many writers will borrow certain characteristics, or motifs, unknowingly or knowingly, from similar or the same sources. But the bigger picture, if you will, is that there is a reason these same motifs pop up in fiction again and again, and it's this. Invulnerability just isn't relatable. On some level, we want to see ourselves in our heroes. We want to have a personal relationship with them. And watching someone struggle through trials and tribulations is a quick way to connect them to us. Drawing parallels between our struggles and theirs, watching the way they triumph over adversity, allows us to use their strength as our own. It's the same concept that underlies the relationships of the Christian saints to the early church. Like the cults of Saint Euphemia, Stephen, and other victims of the Diocletian persecution, which gave these early Christians strength and hope in the face of their own struggles, we too use the persecution of our favorite characters by forces of fate, circumstance, or betrayal to find our own strength. This is why we make martyrs out of characters, and why we like to see them suffer. It's ultimately a subconscious expression of hope that we too can face our trials and come out victorious over them. There is, though, certain groups of people who introduce a sort of paradigm shift in fandom. Some seeming to want less tragedy and more ideal endings and circumstances for their favorites. And there's nothing inherently wrong with this. It's understandable not wanting to see someone you care about go through unnecessary suffering, especially if one views that suffering as the product of outside forces such as bad writing. Daenerys Targaryen. But the issue here comes when these happier endings, or resolution of tragic circumstance, are introduced from a mere want for pure escapism, or the product of simply not knowing what will happen next to your favorite. It's always easier to watch a character go through something terrible when we know that they'll come out of it at the end. But sometimes, there simply is no coming out of it. No truly joyful ending that we can give a character. That's what fanfiction and headcanons are for. And I don't say this from a place of nihilism, which is a ridiculous notion, But by allowing art to take its form and appreciating it as it is, we can maybe come to see that the suffering of these characters does serve a purpose. I compared them earlier to the relationship between the early martyrs of Christianity, but another apt metaphor would be to compare them to the Greek conception of heroes. Many Greek heroes did terrible, even reprehensible things, but were still honored for what great deeds they also accomplished, and many serves as tales to look at when we, in our own lives, were struggling. Like people who can sometimes do great and terrible things, our favorite characters must be allowed to make mistakes as well as to be righteous, to succeed as well as fail, sometimes with disastrous consequences. Whether it be Narcissus falling in love with his own reflection, or Princess Azula succumbing to her lust for power, we can find ourselves in even the most tragic of characters, as long as we let them be people. Thanks for sticking with me through this whole video and listening to my thoughts on this rather random topic. I'm not the one authority on any of the things I've brought up in this, and I would love to hear your thoughts on the notions I've touched on today. Please consider liking this video or subscribing to my channel if you enjoyed yourself. I would really appreciate it. Have a great day, and goodbye for now.
Roxanne, Roxanne.